let's make a start. My name is Karen Buck. I am the Member of Parliament for Westminster North, and it's an enormous pleasure to be opening this launch of the report on the Romanian community and diaspora. And as a Member of Parliament for an inner London constituency, which is one of the most richly diverse communities in the world, I recognise how incredibly important it is for us to understand a little about where our diaspora communities are, what their characteristics are, what their needs are, how we open the most effective forms of communication with them. Because in order to make our communities work effectively, it has to be based on mutual understanding and dialogue. And I think possibly the Romanian community, or probably not one of the large communities in Westminster, but certainly a significant community in many parts of London, is a community that we know less about than we should. And a community that is often misunderstood, I think, and it's incredibly important for us to take this opportunity now to try and redress some of those gaps in the information, particularly, I think, as well, given how the combination of events like Brexit and the pandemic have really been a prevention, I think, to some of the work that was ongoing and needed to be ongoing in terms of community cohesion. So it's going to be my pleasure to introduce your speakers for your opening remarks, and then a panel, and we will be taking as many questions as we possibly can. Please put those questions into the chat function, and then we will be looking at them and picking those out, and we will do our best to make sure that we
Karen, you've just muted yourself.
Apologies, so easy to do. It's a great pleasure to introduce the ambassador, Mr. Malaki, who will be opening the remarks for us this afternoon. So to you, Your Excellency.
Well, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It is a great pleasure for me to make some introductory remarks to this event, which is in a sort of premier event for the Romanian community, something which I don't know that it's happened before. The first study on what means the Romanian diaspora in the United Kingdom. Well, we, all of us working with diaspora, presidential advisor Sandra Paralong, me, myself, Alina, who is one of the representatives of the big organization from the diaspora, we all have our own perceptions about the dimensions of the Romanian community in the UK, about the problems that the dynamics of the Romanian community, the problems that the Romanian community is facing, and the the challenges ahead. But I believe that the big strong point of this report is that it tries to combine analytical approach with our own perceptions, mapping, and so on. So it's the first document provided here in the UK that has its also has not only perceptions, but uses the instruments, the statistical instruments, the instruments of social sciences to give a overview of the Romanian community. I read it with great interest, not also in my capacity, not just in my capacity as an ambassador, still an ambassador to the UK, but also in my capacity as a professor of political science. When I was a serious guy, not an ambassador, I was teaching political science. It's very interesting. Okay, some of the instruments, and this means progress of science, are also interesting for me about mapping. I had a little bit of problems understanding the last part of the report, trying to figure out how all the correlations between various organizations were made, but I will still work on it in the future. Second, I believe that we have to look not also on the radiography, on the mapping of the Romanian community, but also on the what we have to do. And my message is very simple: that we have. I mean, the biggest challenge now for the Romanian diaspora is to build trust, people among themselves, to build trust among various organizations that represent the Romanian diaspora, to build trust in working with institutions, being their institutions in the UK or in Romania, being the Romanian government or various ministries. Because this distrust is one of the big failures of the Romanian diaspora in the UK. And we have to find ways and means to reconstruct, or better to say, to construct trust. Trust, I repeat, among people, trust that they can work together, trust between various organizations that they can join together in common projects, and trust between the diaspora and the state institutions. Third, the third point I want to make is that we have to be a little bit prospective to see what the challenges will be for the future for the Romanian diaspora. Because we are living in a very fast changing world. It's about Brexit, it's about the new stages of the diaspora after the 1st of January next year, but it's also the change of the psychological, social, behavioral climate after the pandemics. So we will have to see what challenges will this community face, and how we will address these challenges, which seem, for me, it's a very interesting topics, and I would gladly hear some opinions of you about this. I checked the figures yesterday or Friday, and we had 670,000 people, Romanians, that were registered for pre-settled and settled stages in the UK. That means that our assumptions, our evaluations about the size of the Romanian community were a little bit underscored, because at the end of this registration process, we can predict that the size of the Romanian community in the UK is much more bigger than we thought about until this process. Thank you very much again. Thank you, Andra, Lucia Martinescu. Thank you, Alina Balatsky, the organizations that you represent, and the Foreign Policy Center for this amazing intellectual effort. And I believe it's a good instrument to work with it in the future for what means integrating this community in a vibrant UK social and political life. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those opening remarks, Ambassador. We're very grateful. I don't know whether Sandra Pralong wants to add anything at this point or to come in at a later point. Sandra?
I just want to congratulate you, the Foreign Policy Center, and Andrea, Lucia, and Alina, and everyone involved, because we don't often realize when we're sitting within institutions how singular effort can make such a difference. And Andrea Lucia started this effort about 2 years ago that I know of. I remember meeting her in Bucharest and her telling me about her intention to do this study, and then getting some criticism from once she did it and presented it together with her colleagues, a preliminary version in April of last year. It was already a big impact, a room full of people in Cotroceni Palace, in the President's Palace, were quite impressed. Then Alina called up and said, nah, I'm not sure some of the figures are quite accurate. And I said, okay, why don't you guys get together and sort this out? And lo and behold, here comes a fantastic report. And I cannot express enough gratitude and pride for Andrea Lucia and for Alina, but especially for Andrea Lucia for marshaling all this effort on her own initially. And, you know, it's easy to forget how people make a difference, in fact, and can muster such monumental tasks. One more thing, you know, the report asked some very interesting questions. And for instance, about the relevance of any diaspora, but of the Romanian diaspora in particular. And I think history has shown that in Romanian domestic politics, the diaspora has made a big impact. I mean, it's been instrumental in the elections. It's, of course, sends home remittances. So both politically and economically, it makes a big difference in domestic politics. But also, and the most important aspect as far as we're concerned in the president's office, is the president's vision that, in fact, the know-how that the diaspora brings back to Romania is critical, and it's a capital of knowledge and attitudes and aptitudes and experience that people, the same people, wouldn't have had they stayed home in Romania. So, and this work is actually a testimony to this very fact, that know-how is what this report was based on and what it provides. Just a last remark about the size and the importance of diasporas in general. I've read somewhere that it's a phenomenon that's here to stay. And I've read somewhere that had all the people who live in countries other than their own, if they gathered in a country and they would form the population of a country, it would be at 250 million, the 5th largest country in the world. And so it's a phenomenon, diasporas, that is here to stay, and we're well advised to take seriously, as you did, the way to engage it, the way to best harness the power of diasporas to make a difference both in the host country and in the home country. And just as an anecdote, in Romania, we just had local elections. One of the mayors of the 3rd largest city in Romania, Timișoara, the one where the revolution started, is now headed as a mayor by a German citizen who doesn't even have the Romanian citizenship, and who was elected as mayor with a huge score, with a huge result. And so we are pleased that the issues and the richness and the wealth of diasporas is coming into the attention of the Foreign Policy Center of Westminster and of the academic and professional community. Romanians have much to contribute, and I look forward to hearing more about the results of the study. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, we're about to go into hearing our 3 panel speakers, and then I'll be looking on the chat and picking out questions for everybody that we will have heard from at that stage. So it's a great pleasure to introduce the panel. Andra Lucia Martinescu, who is the co-founder and coordinator of the Diaspora Initiative. Alina Balaci-Lupascu, co-founder of Romanian Women in the UK, and Dr. Elizabeth Pop, Citizenship and Integration Officer in the Social Integration Team at the Greater London Authority. If I may ask Anna Chia first if she would make her opening remarks.
Thank you, Nat, forgot to unmute it. Thank you so much for your kindness and your acknowledgements, both His Excellency the Ambassador and the Presidential Counselor for the Diaspora, Mrs. Sandra Pralong. They've been extremely supportive throughout this journey, and it helps to hear that there is a voice within the institutions that is cognizant of our efforts. I'll just walk you. Can you see the presentation? Okay. Right, so perhaps a few remarks regarding our partnership and the scope of our research. When I discussed the project with Adam Haag back in 2018, mapping the Romanian diaspora was just an idea. Since then, this collaborative endeavor took shape, and after 2 years of monumental research and countless hours spent observing and understanding a community in the making, we finally reached this point, imparting this knowledge with you, hoping that it brings awareness, both public and political. So Foreign Policy Center has offered us a platform to voice our aspirations and concerns, helping us mediate an understanding of the Romanian diaspora to wider audiences. We are extremely grateful to Adam and Poppy from Foreign Policy for their kind support and patience throughout. I'm also profoundly grateful to Alina Balatsky and Romanian Women in the UK. This successful partnership and outreach would not have been possible without their trust, mentorship, and vision. Which takes me to the very scope of our project. We are here to explore not only the how, but also the why. How do Romanians in the UK associate? How is the diaspora organized? How is it reflected in the data, population statistics, and policies? Is the Romanian diaspora relevant? Are diaspora initiatives impactful? All these questions enabled us to map these communities, perhaps not comprehensively, there will always be some limitations, but sufficiently to observe how and why they cooperate and whether this cooperation translates into actual impact and influence. Is the diaspora an influential actor at policy and decision-making levels in Romania and the UK? If the answer to this question is yes, the diaspora is an influential actor, but only to some extent and perhaps not enough, then we can further explore ways of becoming more impactful as a community in terms of better representation, participation, recognition, but equally when it comes to informing diaspora policies and strategies so they better respond to the community's needs and aspirations. I will not walk you through the entire network analysis, which maps the global interaction between diaspora organizations in the UK, including their cooperation with the public sector, with businesses, NGOs, and civil society at large. All this data can be found in the report, and it will soon become available as we're hoping to build an interactive map and platform, also enabling diaspora organizations to access and explore their own respective networks. So to go back to the question, yes, the diaspora is an influential political actor, but more can and should be achieved. As our findings show, the way in which diaspora organizations, formal and informal, online and offline, cooperate and coordinate, the scope of their partnerships, whether they engage institutions and other actors in the process, their level of embeddedness and outreach within the host country in the UK, the scope of their activities and pursuits, their outlook, whether it's long-term oriented or short-term, all these aspects compound the diaspora's influence and impact. As the network shows, we see some sustained interactions amongst diaspora organizations, certain levels of engagement with institutions as well as civil society in both Romania and the UK. These interactions are sometimes dictated by geography. The closer you are, the more you tend to engage. However, across the board, and when it comes to pushing forward more ambitious agendas that will require the coordination of practices or the pooling of resources, better outreach, more diverse audiences, cooperation remains limited. And we wanted to see why. Despite some commonalities of interest, there is no unified vision as what needs to be achieved for the Romanian community as a whole, but also applied more specifically to the micro communities that form this very diverse social body. The diaspora is not comprised only of professionals or academic elites. The diaspora is not solely a conveyor of culture, traditions, and achievements. Seasonal workers, permanent residents, those with double nationality, younger generations, born here in the UK or elsewhere, whether destitute or affluent, weak or powerful, all define the diaspora, are all comprised within this social body. In this sense, diaspora organizations are in a unique position to create an understanding of these various groups' interests, aspirations, and grievances, finding ways of pushing forward an agenda that may shape the future of these communities. Yes, the diaspora has mobilized, even transnationally, but more sustained engagement with topics that would actually gain political and civic traction has remained limited. What to do? Well, briefly, and also based on our findings and our broader engagement with the community, the main course of action would be intensifying cooperation by sharing good practices and lessons learned, mobilizing towards a common cause through concerted action, seeking to forge wider coalitions of support, and in general, acting strategically. Last but not least, and building on what the ambassador has said, building an advocacy network that sees diaspora organizations capable of acting on the long term cannot happen in absence of trust. I will pass on to my colleague, to Alina, to discuss some figures, demographic considerations, and so on. But thank you so much for your kindness, support, and we finally see this materialize, which is a big milestone. Thank you again.
Thank you very much indeed. Ali, over to you.
Good evening. I will try and share my screen as well so I can walk you through this. Can you confirm that you are seeing it? Is it? Yeah, perfect. So obviously my thanks go also out to the Foreign Policy for this amazing opportunity, to Andra for her courage to take this up with an NGO, and myself personally, to Ambassador Mihalaki and Councillor Pralong for the opening remarks and for always supporting our work here. And of course, the Department for the Romanians Abroad for supporting this project. And last but not least, to all the associations that were part of the focus group for their valuable contributions to this report. So as the chair of this evening, Karen Bach, underlined earlier, there is a need to contextualize the presence of the Romanian in the UK. Despite the number-driven strategies and the public discourse, there were and there still are discrepancies between the various reported data sets. Touching back to the golden circle that my colleague mentioned, this is why we set up to do this, because reporting from different angles and industries or bodies with very little interest sometimes or purpose, other times to triangulate data, this served to depict different realities and ultimately served as basis for projects or strategies that would prove to be unsustainable if not lacking in the desired outcomes. Last but not least, no longer hindered by distance or lack of tools, a strong ethnic group consciousness started to emerge in the Romanian community and the UK. And finally, the community started to engage in advocacy, pushing for issues across targets and areas such as political participation, governance, or other issues that were of interest. How did we do that? We set out to collate data, we conducted research, we ran focus group, and we looked extensively at a myriad of topics. What was what we had as a purpose? We really do believe that this is indeed a turning point and could prove pivotal in a moment that could engage the Romanian diaspora members in listening and outreach exercises to understand what they have and are willing to offer and what they expect from both governments in turn. A continuous evolving dialogue with the diaspora is needed, and both home and host government policies should try to welcome and understand the differing or diverging points of view and ultimately arbitrate and reconcile them. So, back to 2014, the presidential elections brought the Romanian diaspora's potential into limelight. The grey matter migration, the so-called brain drain, and the financial remittances towards the home country were already on the agenda. However, the role of the Romanians abroad as a collective actor was only widely acknowledged in the context above. Although, of course, statistically speaking, the percentage of the diaspora votes did not really actuate to the tipping point. The enormous pressure and the change they've exercised on the change of mindset and perspectives for their families left behind did not go unnoticed. Only one spark was left to ignite, and that spark was the diaspora void. Obviously, the media did not miss out on such a catalytic dimension of the nation's expatriate citizens. Subsequently, the government and major political parties started to return to the drawing board for programs targeting the Romanian population abroad, its social and financial capital through a variety of initiatives and provisions. So fast forward to 2019, the Romanian diaspora in the UK proved again deeply anchored in the realities of the homeland, not only with regards to the social issues, but also in the political life of the country. Although apparently the community located in Italy led the way with the largest number of votes cast, it was soon quite clear that the UK Romanian diaspora was in fact the most committed, with the greatest average votes per section. This simple statistic exercise shows that the Romanian diaspora in the British Isles is ready, when needed, to pursue the higher projects, building on a state of discontent against the perceived systemic injustice in the home country. Back to 2007, Romania became a member of the European Union, and the freedom of movement came into force, changing the pattern of migration for the Romanians from short-term and transient to the individual and into the long-term indefinite stays, often premised on family reunions. We had limited rights back then, which were twice reviewed and extended. But in 2014, these controls ended. And although initially the UK was not a favored migration destination following the global economic crisis of 2008, many Romanian economic migrants from Italy and Spain choose to come and resettle in the UK. So right now in UK, more than 1.2 million Romanians are registered or were registered at some point to work in the country. And you can see that the situation rose dramatically in 2016 when the number of the national insurance number application reached a peak. To contextualize, this was the exact same year that the UK voted to leave the EU. The leaders of the Leave movement campaigned on the idea that, among other things, the UK would benefit from tighter control of its borders, which might have triggered a phase of temporary relocation for certain migrant communities like the Romanians, which are an economic diaspora. Unsurprisingly, fast and consistent demographic surges of the Romanian community happened given the structure of the community. As you can see, a greater proportion is represented by the younger generation. And this was reflected in the annual statistic on live births, including the countries of birth for non-UK born mothers and fathers across England and Wales. The number of children, as you can see, whose parents were born in Romania are on a continuous rise. In 2012, we entered the top 10 nationality and we rose 12 places to become one of the top 2 most common countries of birth lately for mothers and fathers born outside the UK. But the numbers were still not depicting the reality. In 2019, the ONS reported the first number of 450,000 Romanians in the UK, with a vast majority, as you've seen, born here. But the USS scheme reported in March a staggering amount of 564,000 Romanians. And in October, as the ambassador remarked, exceeded 670,000, out of which 93% are based in England. Statistics to the exact number of the young Romanians, though, growing up in the UK are not consistent. And this is a segment that tends to fall through the data collection processes, as we've seen, and strategies of both home and host countries, although their number has, as you can see, been growing steadily. The home country has often no awareness of their numbers and geolocation, while the latter fails to build on this capital. Sometimes they're deemed not important due to either their lack of voting power, and sometimes due to no safe assumption that they will be part of the host society for the long term. However, the national insurance number applications by region have remained consistent over time, remaining London-centric. So why? It is in the interest of migrant sending and receiving states to form better diaspora policies. Firstly, because the involvement of diasporas presents states with certain policy imperatives. And secondly, because they may and will offer unique opportunities. How? Our different grievances and aspirations require not only a nuanced understanding, but also adaptive policies, more responsive to our context. And like my previous panelists have touched, the question of trust, which cannot be ignored. Trust building should prevail in strategies, and this will be pivotal to ensuing a sense of responsibility, be it to Romania or the UK. What is the ultimate aim? It's more than one: impactful and long-term oriented initiatives, a process of sharing good practices, of lessons learned and expertise to access wider support networks, and ultimately a strategic vision by cooperating to effect change.
Thank you very much indeed for that. So for the last of our panel, I'd like to invite Elizabeth to speak to us, please.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Karen, for that introduction, and thank you to the Foreign Policy Center for inviting me, and especially to the to researchers for putting forward this very important and timely piece of research. I'm very proud to be able to represent today the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, the Deputy Mayor for Social Integration, Dr. Debbie Wicks-Bernard, and various teams at the GLA. Not only because social integration is at the heart of what we do, and remaining determined to support the inclusion and participation of Romanian Londoners is at the heart of the recovery strategy for London, but because I'm a British Romanian as well, who came to this country as a migrant. So this is very personal. This is about my community, it's about my duty of representing their voice at the heart of City Hall. I will just start by saying that for the last 2 years, the mayor, the deputy mayor, and various teams have made sure through the London is Open campaign that Romanian Londoners, our second largest community group by nationality in London and the UK, are aware of the fact that not only are they welcome, they are part of the fabric of our great city, but that we want to make sure they have full access to the information in order to make sure they can settle and have all the access to their rights. So in the last 2 years, we have provided the London EU Londoners Hub, which is a one port call for the informations to do with the EU settled status, mental health support, given the very challenging times we're going through even before the pandemic, including increase in hate crime following the EU referendum, but also a port of call for any sort of advice that is available out there that Romanian Londoners and other EU Londoners could have access to. On top of that, the mayor has opened City Hall on various occasions. We had an open door in which we invited representatives from all the EU communities in London, including Romanian Londoners, to thank them for making London a great place, for being our family members, our friends, our work colleagues. And then, of course, on Brexit Day, we opened our doors again to say that we're in this together. And we might be leaving the European Union, but we are not leaving Europe. And certainly Romanian Londoners are here at home. But on top of that, we are very clear that social integration is not just about raising awareness about rights and responsibilities. It is about making sure that diverse Londoners get to know each other, that they have equal access to resources, and they can fully participate in their great city. So I'm very proud to have designed and delivered the biggest civic and democratic participation campaign for any regional authority, and that's London Voter Registration Week. And when we designed London Voter Registration Week this year, we made sure that we had assets about the rights to register to vote in Romanian. We made sure that we worked with Romanian organizations to get the message to those who need to have their voice heard and make decisions that impact their communities and their city. And the feedback has been amazing and unsurprising. Romanian Londoners have felt seen and heard, sometimes for the very first time. They've not only been at the heart of the sometimes what some people might call the hate campaign that led some of the narrative around vote leave, but more importantly, send a message that because they are Londoners, they have a say in decisions, local decisions that impact their city. I think it's also important to look at other areas of work, especially as the pandemic has hit London and the country. And we know from data from my colleagues in London City Intelligence that Romanians are top 10 nationality in the NHS. So Romanian Londoners and Romanian in general have saved lives during this pandemic, for which we are very grateful. We also know that they are key workers. They are highly represented in the construction sector, in manufacturing, in delivery, in social care. So again, really grateful for all the contribution they made, but also aware of the fact that we need to have their voice at the heart of the recovery. So our Deputy Mayor, Debbie Wicks-Bernard, has brought together a host of communities who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And I'm very proud to say that Romanian Londoners were represented in the roundtable with Central and Eastern European communities. And they said, and they brought up some of the issues that His Excellency Andra and Alinda have brought up, which is the lack of trust with the local authorities, the lack of representation in some of our local councils or in political parties for our issues or the issues of Romanians to be brought on the forum and on big platforms. They brought up the issues around poverty, around discrimination, around slavery. And we know that Romanian Londoners are in top 5 nationalities for modern slavery, but also domestic abuse and rough sleeping. And we are very determined to continue having these conversations and looking at ways in working together to address some of this. Both through our community engagement teams, my social integration team, Team London, we are looking at ways to support Romanian Londoners in terms of social infrastructure. So making sure that their community groups are larger in number, are more equipped, have bigger capacity moving forward, that they are involved in our missions as we go into the recovery, be it economic missions or civil society missions. And then I think for me, going back to my remit of a civic and democratic participation, I'm also highly aware of what needs to happen after 1st of January. The fact that we'll have two different new migration systems, so making sure that Romanian Londoners are aware that they have 6 months grace period to still apply for EU settled status, but also that those who arrive are new arrivals need to understand they will they will operate under a new system. But also that we don't have clarity about the voting rights of some EU nationals, including Romanians after the May 2021 election. The UK government has engaged in bilateral agreements with some country. So we know that Poles, EU Londoners from Luxembourg, Spain, and Portugal might have these votes continuing after May 2021, but we are not yet sure about Romanian Londoners. So I'll just finish by saying this, that the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the GLA are determined to continue work on the inclusion and participation of Romanian Londoners in the recovery and beyond, that our strong cooperation and collaboration continues after the end of the transition period. And reiterating the words that Dr. Debbie Wicks-Bernard, the Deputy Mayor for Social Integration, shared at the very first roundtable with Romanian Londoners that I'm very proud to have organized in May 2019, Romanian Londoners remain part of the fabric of our great city. So we really look forward to addressing some of the issues that Andra and Alina have put forward in the report, cooperating with the Foreign Policy Center, and of course, yeah, working with the embassy and the consulate, because we need to be in this together. Thank you.
We're just having a slight technical issue with Karen's sound at the moment. Karen, can you hear us?
I'm having some technical difficulties.
And we can hear you, which is a good sign.
I don't know if somebody could just step in for a minute while I try and sort them out.
I'll step in, Karen, if you can hear me. Adam Hugg from the Foreign Policy Centre here. Just while Karen sorts out her technical issues, I wanted to raise some of the questions that have been put up in the Q&A box. And thank you very much to all the speakers for their opening comments. We've got a number of interesting questions that have come up so far. Not all panelists need to answer all questions, but if we want to have, David Webster's question, for example, who talks about seeing, do you agree with him that sometimes the ability to participate in community and civil society organisations, diaspora groups, is a luxury for Romanians in the UK? Is there a way to make your the diaspora activities more accessible? And Alexandra Balat's question around how can the UK and Romanian authorities work more effectively together to address the lack of information and misinformation in parts of the Romanian community regarding their rights after Brexit. We'll start with those two questions, and then hopefully Karen will get her mic back.
I've got it back, Adam. So I'll pick up as soon as you've completed this round.
I will leave with those two questions, and then if I'll hand back to you for whoever wants to come in. Does Elizabeth want to start perhaps with that last one, and then I'll switch off.
Thank you, Adam. And it's really lovely to see Alexandra's questions because she works so hard on the citizen-led GLA research into barriers to representation and participation. So yeah, really lovely to see her question and all her work. Well, at the GLA, as I said, we made very clear 2 years ago through the amazing work led by my colleague Bela Kosmala and all the migration team that we needed a new Londoners Hub, where we could easily explain in community languages, so including in Romanian, what is the mechanism to apply for settled status, how this pre-settled status, which 60% of Romanians have at the moment, is only a temporary status. And then after 5 years, you need to apply for the more secure settled status, and then potentially, if you can afford, for British citizenship. But I think the question goes further than that. We've seen with the pandemic a rise in conspiracy theories, and it hurts me to see on Romanian forums this anti-vax propaganda. So the COVID has not only brought the importance of education around public information, access to rights, employment rights, EU settled status, and so on, but also the importance of addressing conspiracy theorism when it comes to public health. I think moving forward, it is for other local authorities and for central government to make sure that everyone feels welcome, which means that they have access to full information and they can make informed decisions.
Thank you. If I may add something, if possible, Adam, is it okay?
Go for it. You're back in Karen's hands now.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to mention that, of course, I do salute all the efforts around Greater London area, but we have to keep in mind that what's most important is not to maximize these disparities. So, okay, we have all these efforts in London, but then what happens with other regions? Do these organizations have the capacity to sustain the interests or put forward the interests of the communities? We have to make sure that we're capable of exporting and sharing these practices, so we don't see all these disparities between how the information is disseminated by the different actors. And I think another important aspect is, and to also answer Alexandra Bulat's question, I think it's important to standardize practices, as in institutions have to make sure that at least there are some that organizations, or like the diaspora organizations with whom they interact, that they have the organizational capacity to carry out the task, that they respect good norms, that they have embedded transparency, auditing procedures, so on and so forth, because it just creates a space of trust. And then we don't see all these nefarious behaviors taking over the space. So exporting practices and good practices, and also standardizing them, like bringing them to a common denominator. Yeah, if Alina wants to add something from...
Yeah, I will probably, being a communicator, I will probably touch on the how. We know the why and we know the what, but ultimately we have to remember that the message lies with the receptor, and that diasporic communication, if we can call it like that, is continuously changing, just like migration is. So there needs to be a systematic review of not only procedures, but also the channels where this audience is to be found as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if Karen's still having technical challenges. While we are going through those, just to say to people, if you can put your questions in the Q&A section rather than the chat, that just makes it slightly easier for us to see. I'll quickly go to the question from DOR Serena Stallard. She wants to look at a question. Do you think there's is there scope for greater collaboration, and how do you think we can do away with the sort of white other label, which is in UK statistics, which is a barrier to assessing sort of Romanian and Central and East European contributions more broadly? So how do you identify the community better in official statistics? if we answer that question, but most, I think you can see it in front of you there. And then David Webster's interested in hearing more from Elizabeth about the mayor's efforts to tackle all forms of human exploitation, particularly facing the Romanian community. So perhaps you want to answer those two questions, and then hopefully Karen will have her sound back shortly. And just to say to Valentin and Dick in the raised questions in the chat there, but we'll try and get that put into the Q&A section going forward. Thanks. Andrew, do you want to start?
I'll take on to the white other, because this is something very dear to me again. And I would just say by asking probably, and let us not forget, if we go back to the census of 2011, for example, things changed when the UK introduced for the first time the question on national identity due to this particular increased interest in national consciousness. So it was, okay, a subjective self-identifying measure, but it was the first time that the question appeared, how would you describe your national identity? And respondents were able to express what country or nation where they felt most affiliated to, and they could actually take more than one national identity. And actually in the case of Brand, this proved to be pivotal, because this showed exactly the dimension of the Romanian community in that. So we can, to answer in a short sentence, we will only position to anything else by asking.
I'll answer Sorina's question. Thank you, Sorina. We've closely collaborated. They do amazing things. Yes, there is scope for more. There is a necessity to be able, like, we can export this model and map the diaspora in different countries, because based on the country of residence, you'll get different outcomes, like people interact, cooperate differently. They have different aspirations, but it's important to at least to acknowledge that we can pursue this on the longer term. And it's also important that institutions support our endeavors, right, and recognize and acknowledge the necessity of understanding the diaspora, both from a social sciences point of view, but also from being embedded and actively engaged with the community, because that's how you can actually measure its scope, depending on the different activities. So thank you, Sarina. Yes, on the long term, there is a plan to do this, most certainly.
Elizabeth, do you want to come on?
Yeah. So to answer David's questions, and thank you, David, for the question. As I mentioned, through our social integration and community engagement, we have regular roundtables and engagement with representatives of the Romanian community. And they are from every walk of life, from organizations of various sizes, from various faith denominations and ethnic backgrounds. And they regularly put forward issues they are concerned about. And without a doubt, exploitation, discrimination is one of them. Separately, we've got our city intelligence and our MOPAC teams who monitor this, and we regularly make available grants to civil society organizations in order to be able to work with Londoners and Romanian Londoners in communities directly. I think it's important to acknowledge that the statistics I've shared were in terms of Romanians being in top 5 victims of modern slavery were UK-wide. I'm afraid I do not have at my tip of my fingers the data for London, but I can look into it, and it would be lovely to connect after the event anyway. But I think it's important to acknowledge that this was while Romanians were EU citizens enjoying full rights. So yes, our worry is that cases of exploitation will increase with the new immigration system. And I'll leave it here.
Thank you so much for that. From Karen shaking her head, I sense that she's still having technical issues. Is that correct? Yep. It's we have a beautiful old parliament which was not amazingly designed to cope with the internet and Wi-Fi and all sorts of technology. So so Karen may still keep trying. But Sandra, do you want to come in on any of those points?
Adam, can I pick up the 2 questions that are more about domestic Romanian politics? One is about the community centers. And I'm sorry the asker has chosen to remain anonymous. because it would have been very helpful had we known his or her name, to suggest that he or she gathers. To the best of my knowledge, the law is still standing. All it requires is 5,000 signatures of Romanians wanting to set up a community center in the UK, in whatever location those 5,000 people choose. And so, Anonymous, please unmask your identity and get in touch with us or with the embassy to follow up on what the procedure is to get a center. And then there's Valentin Chobotaru question about why are there not more seats allocated for Romanians in the diaspora in the Romanian parliament. And of course, it's a very sensitive issue, and we've been struggling, and the president, as you, Valentin may know, and now ruling party, the Liberal Party, have been quite keen on increasing the the representation. Unfortunately, it takes a lot more pressure from abroad, from you Romanians, from Valentin, people like you, and it needs some collective action, basically. It needs, Romanian parliamentarians need to get tons of letters, tons of petitions requiring a better representation, because unfortunately, without public pressure, those who fear, or let me put it in a positive way, those political forces who are rather keen on the status quo would rather not get the fresh blood and ideas from abroad be part of the political discourse in Romania. So again, it's up to you to mount the kind of public pressure that makes parliamentarians, especially those that you're not voting for, relent.
Well, can I add two short comments to these two questions? Well, being a little bit contradictory with my former colleague, Sandra, first, I have my doubts that the law about the community centers, and it was built in 2016, it's functional and can be put in practice. 5,000 signatures for to make such a community center is a lot. There are still problems of uncertainties regarding the financing, who should run this community centers. So probably future parliament should re-examine or make it as a policy priority to in terms of diaspora, to re-examine this law and to put it into an accord with some more realistic, with a more realistic approach. Second, there were some legislative projects about increasing the number of parliamentarians for the diaspora. The National Liberal Party had such an initiative. I believe there there was an increase from 2 senators to 5 and from 4 members of the chamber to 12, if I remember very well, but there was no political majority for pushing through this this change in the numbers of in the number of parliamentarians. This is also an issue that a future majority, a future parliament could address. I thank you very much, all of you. Unfortunately, I have to leave. I have another meeting at 5 o'clock. Thank you again for this exceptional report, which provides us a very useful, which is a very, is and will be a very useful instrument for us. Thank you, Andra. Thank you, Alina. And I hope we can meet soon and design some strategies based on this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'm sorry I've had some technical problems, but very grateful indeed that you were able to join us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Apologies again for the technical problems. We've got a couple more questions. So one from Dino Gindu, who asks, how can your study help a similar approach to the diaspora in relation to the institutions in the country of origin, but also in the countries where immigration takes place? I don't know who'd like to have a go at answering that from our panel.
Oh, can I go?
Please.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very pertinent question. Thank you so much. The analysis maps connections or relationships with Romanian institutions, the degree to which the Ministry for Romanians Abroad or the Romanian presidency, usually what we name diaspora governance, are actually involved and build relationships with organizations and so on. So I think it will be very informative mapping. I think the most important aspect would be to diversify a bit the funding mechanisms and their objectives, for instance. I think that would be, if there's a lesson to be taken away, more money, more government funding should actually go into building the organizational capacity of diaspora associations. More should go towards encouraging transnational projects and being flexible in accommodating such partnerships. For instance, like I'm working with Alina, she's a diaspora organization, but the project is implemented by Foreign Policy Center, so on and so forth. National guidelines do not capture these forms of cooperation because there's not enough flexibility. We need to have a more integrated bilateral approach. For instance, Romanian institutions should be cognizant, should be informed of the regulations and standards we have to uphold in the country of residence, in UK, for instance. So there's a big conversation to be had, and I'm very happy that Dino Gundu has asked it. Looking forward to exploring solutions.
Thank you for that very much. Anybody else like to make any comment in response to that question? I can move on to our next. No. Okay, thank you much. So the next question was from an anonymous contributor who asks, are the Romanian authorities and other organisations planning in the future to change their focus from London only to the wider community all over the UK by engaging in those communities?
I'm going to take this one. I suppose it's because the tone of my presentation came back to London at the end, but this was only to give my fellow panelist, Elizabeth, a chance and to sort of give a lyrical thread to the evening and to for it all to make sense. It has actually happened. The focus was shifted to the greater of the UK. And this can be seen from either consulting the embassy page on the organizations, on the Romanian organizations that are active in the associative environment in the UK. But not only to them. I lead an organization that has several branches outside London. We started in London, but we are outside London now. And we've mentored a few others that are further out. And actually part of the focus groups that we conducted for this report were based based outside London or were doing across London work, like the likes of Work or the Eastern European Resource Centre, which cater not only to the wider of the UK geographically speaking, but also to the wider of the communities, because they don't look only after the Romanian community. So there is already a scope to work with the Romanian community, with the wider Romanian community. Personally, I found, for example, a great support in the Honorary Council of Wales, of Romania to Wales, who is a great channel. It's the question of first building these networks. And please consult Andra's side of the report, which will bring light to this question as well. But also a question of proactivity, because we also need the local communities in these areas to come forward and to assume their civic identities and to be willing to do their share in order to have their voice heard.
And if I could add, just to reiterate Alina's transition point, at the GLA, we are very much sharing best practice and the resources with the rest of the country. And the mayor regularly has meetings with metro mayors and others, especially in areas who have big EU communities. So it's very much about sharing best practice and working together, definitely.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to comment? No, okay, I'll go on to our next question, which is from Ruxandra, who asks, are there any plans to debunk conspiracy theories and inform the Romanian diaspora about managing health risks and expected vaccination programs in the context of the diaspora being mobile and remaining mobile during the pandemic? How can Romanian organizations help?
Oh, I'll take this one too. We've already done it. For example, the two major boroughs with Romanian populations in the Greater London, and I now refer to the boroughs of Harrow and Brent. They've been extremely proactive, and in collaboration with the health authorities, there've already been a number of videos put out in Romanian. The Greater London Authority has also continuously through the COVID pandemic communicated in Romanian. They've put out posters, they've put out videos, they've put out all sorts of social media friendly posts that the only thing organizations had to do was share, really. So again, I'm coming to the proactivity level, or, we live in a digital time, and we have our challenges, be it finding out our voice in a Zoom meeting or finding the correct information in the networks. So ultimately, again, proactivity, if we do not follow the activities of these authorities or organizations, the message tends to sift through just because of social media algorithms. So it's a simple matter of following, of liking the post, of commenting on them. You don't always have to like it, but generally becoming involved. So there has been communication sent out there, and the organizations were very much involved in it.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to comment on this very important issue of public health?
Just to say that, as I said, the GLA, the mayor have shared a lot of information in various formats so far, and we will continue to produce others in the new year. And as I communicate with Alina and other civil society organizations, anyway, we'll continue to cascade those so they reach the right avenues. But also to reiterate something the panel already said, how that the mechanisms we use to make sure that information reaches people is important. So making sure it's Facebook groups, making sure it's WhatsApp groups, making sure it is the diaspora media, both traditional and digital. And I think finally, one of the things that we've heard from Romanian Londoners in our roundtable is elements of barrier to digital access. So either not having the physical equipment or not having always the digital skills. And is that something that we're constantly looking into?
Thank you very much indeed. Right, questions are pouring in now, which is lovely to see. So we have a question from Alina Dalia, if I'm pronouncing people's names correctly, forgive me if I'm not, who is a senior lecturer at Bournemouth University, who would like to ask the panelists if have thoughts on joint partnerships or funding schemes for capacity and community building of the Romanian diaspora in the UK. She says she's just completed a research project looking at the relation between the status of migrants in the UK and the perception of country images. Conducted focus group, and to my surprise, she says one of the findings was the need to address both capacity and community building, especially around the emotional aspects of migration, such as psychological counselling, to address the emotional costs and the integration that affects all migrants, regardless of their social status. A very interesting question indeed. Anybody wish to comment on that? Sandra, you look as if you're about to.
Before any of the two panelists decides, I want to put in a good word about Alina Dolea, whom I know quite well, who is an amazing expert in country identity and images. And she's been a colleague of mine a long time ago in an association of public relations professionals. She's very committed and serious, and it's a great idea to partner with someone who has the firepower that Alina has.
Thank you very much for that.
Just going to add up that obviously even this study was kindly supported by the funding opportunities offered by the Romanian government. So this is a start. Obviously, this is only a starting point. We might look like we've just delivered a report, but we are actually looking forward. And I was just talking to Andra the other day when we were sort of putting things together, how the myriad of themes that open up now by just starting this, it feels like we're just tapping into the subject, and we certainly are. And there's so much to study in the UK, and there are so many facets of the Romanian diaspora evolving here. I also spoke to Alina just the other day, my my colleague, I could say, in studying this. And obviously, there is a need to address capacity and community building. Andra has addressed this in the report. And I actually saw that somebody was asking when will the report be published. The report is already live on the Foreign Policy Center since this morning, so people can just download it and give us our feedback. I even expect a constructive criticism, because I consider it feed forward, not necessarily feedback. And like we said, we're more than willing to, and we're excited about having so many directions to go through, Alina, especially the emotional aspects of migration. And I was just debating this morning with a professor, doctor from Iași, that there's a scope for operational research, for example, on the language and neuroscience aspects regarding the first generation of children growing up in the UK. So yes, we're looking at all of that. We have thoughts. Just invite us. We're there.
Yeah, and if I can add something, thank you, Alina Dola. I would be very happy to connect and liaise after this so we can discuss future avenues. What I wanted to mention about the counseling, what the pandemic actually exacerbated when many Romanians were rendered destitute, immediately destitute, and that's something we've discussed with the frontline organizations. It was often extremely hard to provide the necessary all-encompassing help and assistance that you need in order to overcome this. So it's not only work or labor rights assistance and counseling, or applying for social security schemes. It's also the psychological aspect. And in most cases, organizations that were understaffed or forced to migrate online did not simply have the organizational capacity to provide this very necessary help. So I think it's something we should definitely explore, like how to support frontline organizations that need to offer support, but this type of support takes different facets. It's not only the provision of services, it's also the counseling, the mental health aspects that need to be addressed simultaneously for it to be effective, for the response to be effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Dick Rogers has asked in the chat, and in a way, it sort of flows on, I think, from the previous question, because the migrant experience, as I found constituency and people have a strong desire to be settled, to feel comfortable in their position in the country they've settled to. And he was asking whether the panel's view is that the cost of citizenship is a cause of problem for the community, and whether it sends out a kind of unfriendly message to people seeking to get them. Anybody have a view on that?
I don't think we caught the end of your question because it became mute and then you unmuted again.
Sorry, it was a question about the cost of citizenship and whether this was a problem for members of the Romanian community, and whether the panel felt that it sent out a kind of an unfriendly message to people seeking to get settled. Anybody have a view on that?
Well, maybe I can share what the mayor and Asa Dăgile have been doing around this. So at the moment, and actually Alexandra Vlad just asked a question, and she's leading young Europeans on a campaign for access to citizenship. At the moment, the cost is over £1,300, which of course is very high. It's higher than most European countries, and comparable with a similar economy, the US is 3 times higher. So from the reaction and interaction we have had from Romanian landers, it is that it's high, that it should be reduced. And in fact, the mayor has been very vocal about the fact that young people in particular should have access to a path to citizenship and no barriers. And yeah, we hope to be able to continue work in this area.
Thank you very much. Last couple of questions have come in. Lily Harding asks, a central point for the Romanian community around the UK are the Romanian churches around the country. To what extent is this an aspect that you have considered in order to build and strengthen existing networks? And given a high level of trust in the church compared to government authorities, the ambassador referred to the issue of trust in his opening remarks. This is a particular area that needs to be developed. So anyone on the panel have a view about the relationship?
I think we have.
I'm a long-standing support member of the oldest Romanian parish in the UK, St. George in Holborn, which has been standing on the seat for over 60 years. I'm proud to say, and we definitely reverted to the religious organizations, and actually they've been, even for the Romanian embassy, they've been a continuous and trusted partner when it came to communicating messages to the community. So we did take that into consideration, and actually this sort of links me to Gabrielle's questions further down, who was asking me if we worked with partners in Scotland. Actually, in Northern Ireland, this is what we first touched to, was the religious organizations, because we do know that the ethnic dynamic in the case of the Romanian community tends to dictate a sort of gravitas for these centers and a sort of magnetism towards it, be it the trust or be it that it's a partner of conversation that is non-invasive and that does not ask any questions and does not have expectations. So yes, we did reach out. There is scope for further work in Scotland and Northern Ireland because the communities there are still granular and they still haven't sort of become cohesive. So I'm sure Andra will agree, more than happy to extend to Scotland. Not only the churches, but also the consular office there proves to be a good point of contact there. But yeah, in terms of the religious organization, we're very much on board with them. And we've actually had very positive feedback for the report already from Father Popescu in London.
Yeah, and if I may add something about the churches, it's been very interesting because we analyzed most Romanian Orthodox churches and parishes in the UK, and what we're able to observe, churches and parishes, they have their own networks, they have their own charities, religious charities. They're very well embedded within the community, as in they act they have a cohesive role. They foster socialization within communities, and they're very well embedded. So it's to some extent, it's a model that can be replicated even by organizations to have this sort of self-sustaining network and drawing in a wider support base. But yes, they're a very significant presence.
Thank you, and thank you for covering the point of Scotland as well. So a couple more questions. Well, one was a point from Larissa, I think more than a question, which is about the channel of communication through the main Romanian newspaper, and that this is well read, particularly people over 45. I don't know if anybody has a thought on that, particularly with engaging with younger Romanians. And then Daniela Camara says, greetings from Washington and congratulations on your work. Do you consider the UK Romanian diaspora be similar to that in other countries, and specifically to the United States? And is this a model that be used and duplicated in other countries?
In terms of Ziarul Românesc, the Romanian publication that goes out, actually this is one of the very good examples of good practices, because we found as an association, particularly I'm talking now about the Romanian women in the UK, we found in Ziarul Românesc a trusted partner that was open to communicate subjects of interest, not only the comfortable ones. We found them very open also when it came to tackling subjects like modern slavery, which is very much on the table. And last but not least, domestic violence, particularly in the context of COVID exacerbated. So yes, we do know about Ziarul Românesc. Actually, like I said, go to the report, you will be quite surprised to maybe find it in the mapping that Andra did extensively. And yes, indeed, it offers a channel for various segments of population of this different particular age.
Thank you very much for that. Another anonymous questioner says, national identity and culture is something that's very important to parents bringing up their children in the UK away from Romania. What can be done by the Romanian and British authorities to make it easier for Romanian and parent children to access this kind of well, enrichment and also legacy, historical legacy?
I'll take this one just because I'm more into the community side of it. And Andra, please add on if you have. There are so many already weekend schools that do this. Again, a question of proactivity, because the only thing needed is to actually Google it. There's been, for example, Alex Z Educational in London has been standing on that place in Hendon for almost 6 years, offering a weekend course for the Romanian children and parents who wish to transfer their identity on. But this is very much a two-way street. You may have a myriad of associations or of weekend schools. If the parents are not proactive and they're not you know, taking this on, this question of transferring their identity, and they're not standing proud of who they are, this journey for the little ones growing here will not start off in a happy place, unfortunately. No matter how much the local government or the schools will try to encourage the identity and the manifestations of it, we all need to be in this together. It has to be done across board. I'll quickly touch on the US subject, which Daniela brought on from Washington. This is a subject that's common to all the diasporas across the world, the education and the transferring of identities, and that can be replicated. And I believe Andra will answer on how this model can be replicated in other communities. But we cannot compare the diasporas across the world, be it historic or economic or just geo-located diasporas cannot be, because just for the simple reason that their circumstances are different. And maybe Sandra can bring us an interesting point here, because she used to be an expat at a different time. She lived in the US. She's been here quite a few times, so she can tell whether we differ or not. But I just think we shouldn't really look for common points. We should just be proud of our common trait of being Romanian and of our values. And we should just try to find a scope for common work in the future to transfer the identity.
And moreover, if I can add something, it's yes, there's not the same context, like the context is different, widely different from the US to the UK, but the same methodology can be replicated. We can ask the same questions using the same research, and just apply it in exploring interactions between communities, organizations in the US. So the scope is endless, I would say, provided we maintain the level of ambition.
If I may chime in on
Elizabeth,
this.
please. Oh, no, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Daniela, for your question. You're right on, because as I was reading the report and listening to the presentations, it's obvious that Andra and Alina have put together a very interesting methodology to gather the data, which perhaps would be useful to be harnessed in a small methodological report so that we can share it with other communities and see whether there are takers who can do the work similar to yours in their communities. So a very brief sort of template, methodological template that can be replicated, sort of knowledge management kind of paper would be very useful. And that would answer also to Sorina's question about other diasporas. Maybe you can share it not just for the Romanian diasporas in different countries, but among the various ethnic diasporas in the UK. You know, your work is such a pioneering effort that, and it's what I come back to what I said first. It's so amazing that this was not done by a fancy institution with lots of researchers and firepower, but by one individual, a couple of individuals, and then joined in the joint efforts of two researchers. So Andra and Alina and your colleagues in the previous iteration of the report, Andra. So I think that it would be really great if you could provide the skeleton of this methodological template to us and to other communities in the UK, and to us to share among Romanian communities abroad. And to the question, anonymous, unfortunately, a questioner about parents' education and identity, I would encourage the listeners to write to us at the presidency. The address is very simple. It's diaspora, spelled like in English, at presidency, like in English, .ro, diaspora at presidency.ro, and add you to our mailing list. We're putting out a weekly newsletter that has all kinds of initiatives. And with your permission, I'd like to put this report in our newsletter also, because it's inspiration for others. But to the question about initiatives, in this newsletter, other than the president's activities that are of relevance to the diaspora, there's lots of information about Romanian language courses, about electronic libraries, and so on. So we welcome your joining our mailing list and getting feed forward from you on what's relevant and what you'd like us to add more of.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if I may add something also, perhaps part of the closing remarks. It's the fact that one of the objectives why we pursue this research is to identify exactly the way in which the diaspora can become relevant, can become impactful, not only nationally, not only in its rapports and with the Romanian institutions or the host country, but overall. Transnationally. And for this, in order to maximize impact, we have to understand how different communities congregate and what their activities are. So if we keep this in mind, I think we can build something strategically from the ground up and take this initiative further. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. That ringing you can hear behind me is a voting bell in Parliament, but don't worry about it. So I think we've come to a conclusion this afternoon and had a number of excellent questions and absolutely brilliant presentations. And can I say it's been absolutely wonderful to have so many women on the panel as well, speaking for the community and making the contribution. So I don't know whether Adam Hug wants to make any remarks in conclusion himself. Adam, are you?
Well, thank you very much, Karen, and thank you very much on behalf of the Foreign Policy Centre particularly to Andra and Alina for their amazing work, and obviously the work my colleague Poppy Auger in particular put in to help bring this together today. Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you very much to Sandra and Ambassador and Elizabeth. We've enjoyed the discussion. Please, if you haven't already, do have a look at the report on the Foreign Policy Centre website, sign up to our email list and social media channels if you want to find out more about this and many other interesting topics that we do over the months ahead. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you from me to all the panelists and speakers. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Karen.
Right.
Bye-bye.